This is World News Program coming to you live from Algiers. I'm Miriam Zian, and these are the headlines. Intensive diplomatic activity ahead of next Saturday's AU summit, as Algeria calls for a unified African vision to confront threats and strengthen continental integration amid broad consensus on African-led solutions to the continent's crises. Martyrs and wounded reported amid continued bombardment in Gaza, raids and arrests in the West Bank. UN warns of plans to strip Palestinians of their rights and calls for a firm international stance to deter the occupation. Between caution and optimism, Trump speaks of a new nuclear agreement while warning against Iran acquiring nuclear weapon. Tehran says it is ready for any inspection, renewing its rejection of pressure and unreasonable demands. In Ukraine, battlefield escalation and civilian casualties in several regions following a major Russian attack. Kiev boosts air defense, Moscow reaffirms its objectives, and the EU approves a new loan to support Ukraine. Welcome back to the details of your nightly news. First, the African Union Executive Council meeting at foreign ministers level in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, continues in its two-day session ahead of the 39th AU summit. With Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf attending, discussions focus on water security, peace and security, political and humanitarian crises, and silencing the guns initiative alongside efforts to curb military coups. Ministers will also elect members to key AU bodies, including the Peace and Security Council and Human Rights Committees. Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf called for a forward-looking collective African vision to help the African Union confront emerging risks, global shifts and evolving threats. Speaking during a session on the African Union Permanent Representatives Committee's 51st report, he warned against limiting the AU's focus to short-term internal issues, cautioning that the current international climate risks marginalizing Africa and sidelining its priorities.
The African summit that we are preparing for today carries exceptional importance given the broader international context in which it is being held, a context that we all recognize as threatening to marginalize Africa, obscure its priorities, and sideline its role and voice. From this perspective, our focus should not be limited to immediate matters concerning the internal management of our organization. Rather, it must extend to a broader and more comprehensive horizon in order to establish a truly forward-looking collective vision.
In the same context, Attaf emphasized the need to restore the centrality or the vitality of the African Unity Project as an essential strategic choice to safeguard the continent's shared destiny in a turbulent world.
رؤية تحدد بدقة ما يتربص بنا جميعا من أخطار ومن تهديدات.
A vision that precisely identifies the danger and threats that confront us all, a vision that adapts our joint work to the rapidly evolving changes around us, and a vision that restores the centrality of our unity project as an indispensable strategic choice to safeguard our shared destiny in today's turbulent world and in the world of tomorrow. A world we hope will be more attentive to our concerns, more mindful of our interests, and more responsive to our aspirations.
Ahmed Attaf has renewed Algeria's support for efforts to strengthen the African Union, move it beyond inward-looking approaches, and enable it to address current challenges with realism and responsibility. Let's have a listen.
والجزائر تدعم أي جهد من شأنها أن يسهم.
Algeria supports any effort that contributes to strengthening our organization, helping it move beyond a self-focused stance, enhancing its presence both continentally and internationally, and enabling it to deal with current challenges, whether continental or global, with full realism and responsibility. From Algeria, our Commission receives all support and backing, as does the chairmanship of the session.
The African Union Commission chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf called for reforming AU institutions as a key step toward peace and development across the continent. Speaking at the opening of the 48th AU Executive Council session, he said African leaders will address political instability, security crises, conflicts, and terrorism at the 39th AU Summit next weekend, warning in particular of the growing terrorist threat in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa.
On doit l'admettre, ce sont des questions difficiles.
We should admit it. They are complex issues that will undoubtedly be the subject of in-depth discussions by our leaders. Political stability and security crises, as well as the continent's conflicts, remain a major concern for the African Union, as terrorist threat in the Sahel region and the Horn of Africa still persists. We welcome the return of Guinea and Gabon to the African Union following their successful transition process.
And he also affirmed that the African Continental Free Trade Area and African Union institutions remain essential to strengthening continental integration.
La ZLECAf et les agences spécialisées.
The African Continental Free Trade Area and the institutions of the African Union remain essential to fostering integration through innovative financing and enhanced partnerships with the private sector and the African civil society. Decisive leadership and clear strategic priorities will be key to our success.
And on the sidelines of the African Union Executive Council meetings, Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held talks with his Tunisian counterpart, Mohamed Ali Nafti. The two coordinated on key AU agenda items and reviewed joint efforts to advance the bilateral partnership following the outcomes of the 23rd session of the Algerian-Tunisian Joint High Commission. Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Maitama Tugar, said his country shares the same vision and values as Algeria regarding crises in Africa and in the world. In statements to Al24 News following a bilateral meeting with Ahmed Attaf, Tugar said both sides discussed bilateral cooperation, including the latest developments on the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline project, which will run from Nigeria through Niger to Algeria, in addition to other political and economic issues.
Well, you have to bear in mind that Nigeria and Algeria are not just similar in name, but they are also very similar in terms of their worldview, in terms of their values, in terms of their approach to global politics. So, of course, we're also neighbors. We are in the same region, more or less, and so we discussed several things, including security, including, of course, the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, which is supposed to run from Nigeria through Niger to Algeria. We also discussed many things to do with trade and investment and other collaborative efforts, both here in the African Union and bilaterally.
Nigeria's foreign minister also stressed the need to handle necessary presence in mercenary presence in Africa. He added that Algeria and Abuja agree on reviving Article 4 in addressing mercenary activity on the continent, reaffirming the importance of maintaining unity in African positions when confronting crises.
As members of the Peace and Security Council, we continue to work together to try and resolve the crisis in our region, which is terrorism, like I mentioned, and also, of course, Sudan and South Sudan and Congo and Somalia. And these are things that we have a consensus on, we agree, and we present a unified approach. And it's very important that we continue to do that. That is why we both agree that we should revive the old OAU convention on mercenaries, that there should be no mercenaries in Africa of any shape or form. And we're working towards bringing it back under the auspices of the African Union.
Zimbabwe's foreign minister Amon Murwira affirmed that Algeria and Harare agree on adopting exclusively African solutions to the continent's crises. In an exclusive statement to All24 News following his meeting with Ahmed Attaf, Murwira stressed the importance of respecting African state sovereignty in shaping their policies, calling for silencing the guns and ending poverty as root causes of instability in Africa.
We share common positions in basically ensuring the dignity of the people of Africa. And ensuring the dignity of the people of Africa can only come from African solutions. And those African solutions that we push through the African Union is exactly the common position that we share, because we are looking forward to Agenda 2063, way of the Africa we want, and that Africa must be socially cohesive, that Africa must be politically cohesive, that Africa must be economically vibrant. It means we must be able to silence the guns and eradicate poverty, because most of these problems that we face are due to poverty. And poverty has to be tackled head on, and our policy-making space, which is our sovereignty, must be respected. In that way, we are able to advance our goals.
Murwira also highlighted the depth and strength of relations between Algeria and Zimbabwe. He said both countries remain committed to developing their bilateral relations across various sectors, based on a historical foundation of solidarity and mutual support.
The Republic of Zimbabwe and Algeria share very close political relations and close economic relations. In other words, our relations span a whole spectrum, from bilateral to the multilateral world. And we were just having discussion to update on the state of our excellent political relations and our shared positions in the international arena. And we always enjoy our discussions because we share a lot in common. As you know, Zimbabwe, to be independent, was closely supported and practically supported by Algeria. And we continue to grow our relations in all spheres of development, from political to social to economic. And so we were having a very nice meeting with the Honorable Minister, sharing and reaffirming our excellent and very strong relations that exist between Zimbabwe and Algeria.
And South Africa reaffirmed its support for the right of the Sahrawi and Palestinian peoples to self-determination and to enjoy their legitimate rights. In an exclusive statement to All24 News following his meeting with Ahmed Attaf, South Africa's foreign minister said Algiers and Pretoria share the same positions on the Palestinian and Sahrawi causes, praising the strong bilateral relations between the two countries.
Yeah, it's the continuation of strengthening the very strong bilateral relations that exist between the two countries, including at multilateral level on various issues. As you are aware, we also share some views with regards to the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. It's an issue that we continue to share notes, compare notes on the ongoing negotiations and resolution, which remains very dear to our hearts. Yes, we also engaged about that matter, which is also very dear to our hearts with regards to the self-determination, the issues of peace and security for the people of Palestine, and ongoing processes through the UN Security Council. These are issues we continuously being seized with.
In the same context, he stressed the importance of respecting the sovereignty of African states and protecting their institutions. Let's have a listen.
We have to continue to strengthen the PSC, the Peace and Security Council of the AU itself, to be able to be self-reliant to member states of the AU, to stand and be able to protect and pursue peace in the continent on our own, but also on the issues of critical minerals, value addition in the continent. As you will have also seen, this is an agenda we pursued vigorously through our G20 presidency.
In occupied Palestine, 2 were killed, or 2 children specifically were injured by Zionist forces in Khan Yunis and Beit Lahia amid ongoing airstrikes and artillery shelling. The Gaza Ministry of Health reported 8 martyrs and 20 wounded over the past 24 hours, bringing the death toll since October 11 ceasefire to 591 and 1,578 injured, with 720 bodies recovered from under the rubble. OCHA reported new Israeli airstrikes, artillery shelling, and naval fire in Gaza over the past 24 hours, including attacks on residential areas. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric emphasized the need to protect civilians and infrastructure during military operations.
Meanwhile, in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has received more reports of airstrikes, bombing, shelling, Navy fire, and shooting in the last 24 hours. This includes strikes in residential areas, which puts civilians in danger and adds to the immense hardship they've endured over the last 28 months. OCHA stresses that civilians are protected under international humanitarian law, wherever they are, whether they cross military demarcation lines or just near them. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must always be protected during military operations, and constant care must be used to spare them.
Dujarric warned that thousands of Gaza patients lack access to essential treatment and called for lifting Israeli restrictions to expand humanitarian aid.
Thousands of patients remain without opportunities for treatment and recovery, as some critical services are still unavailable in the Gaza Strip. Their top priority is to scale up local services, including rehabilitation of damaged facilities and expanding critical care.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on Wednesday called on the United States and the international community to take a firm stance against Israeli measures aimed at strengthening its control over the occupied West Bank. Speaking at a press conference during a visit to Oslo, Abbas condemned settler violence and what he described as Israel's withholding of $4 billion in aid destined to the Palestinian people, saying these serious violations require a decisive response from Washington and the international community as they constitute branches of international law. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, warned on Wednesday that Israeli plans to tighten control over the Palestinian West Bank amount to a step toward entrenching its illegal annexation. In a statement, Turk said Israeli decisions are accelerating the stripping of Palestinians of their rights, forcibly displacing them and increasing their deprivation of natural resources.
If these decisions are implemented, they will undoubtedly accelerate the dispossession and forced displacement of Palestinians and will lead to the establishment of more illegal Israeli settlements. They will also further deprive Palestinians of their natural resources and restrict their enjoyment of other human rights.
The Arab Inter-Parliamentary Union strongly condemned what it called illegal Israeli measures recently approved to expand and entrench colonial settlement activity in the occupied West Bank. In the statement signed by its president and Speaker of Algeria's National People's Assembly, Brahim Bourali, the union said these settlement policies represent a blatant challenge to the will of the international community and a systematic obstruction to prospects for a just and comprehensive peace for the Palestinians.
The Arab Inter-Parliamentary Union condemns in the strongest term the illegal Zionist measures recently adopted by the occupation authorities aimed at expanding and entrenching colonial settlements in the West Bank in flagrant violation of international law and relevant UN resolutions.
The union reaffirmed its support for Palestinian self-determination and statehood, urging the international community to ensure their protection. Let's have a listen.
The Arab Inter-Parliament Union affirms its unwavering support for the Palestinian people and their inalienable right to self-determination and the establishment of their independent and sovereign state on all their occupied territories in accordance with international law.
Washington and Tehran signal a tentative return to diplomacy over Iran's nuclear program despite deep divisions. US President Donald Trump says Iran seeks a deal, while Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian affirms his country's readiness for inspections to prove its nuclear program is peaceful. Nabil Khazini has more details in this report.
For a tentative step as diplomacy is on the edge, Washington and Tehran try to navigate the future of Iran's nuclear program. The divide is deep, the stakes are high, and both sides know it. They also know that the language must be measured and that a single misstep could have serious consequences. In Washington, they speak of dialogue, of communication opening slowly. Donald Trump says that Iran wants a deal, but cautions that failure could have serious consequences. Any agreement, he stressed, must bar nuclear weapons and limit missile development.
They want to make a deal. They wouldn't talk to anybody else, but they're talking to me. But, you know, it's a good question. A lot of people say no. And I would say that I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want.
In Tehran, the message is equally firm and carefully weighed. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian told crowds that Iran is willing to allow inspections to prove the peaceful nature of its nuclear program. Iran's missiles program remains off limits, a red line that separates the two sides.
We are not seeking nuclear weapons. We have stated this repeatedly, time and again, and we are ready for any kind of verification.
Different expectations, one process, limited space for compromise. Still, the dialogue continues. Iranian officials describe early meetings as useful, helping clarify positions and setting the stage for future discussions. Washington acknowledges small signs of progress, while underscoring that fundamental disagreements remain unresolved. Behind the scenes, the process is fragile. Indirect exchanges, careful wording, and cautious diplomacy highlight just how delicate these talks are.
In other news, Ukrainian authorities reported 9 dead and dozens injured from Russian shelling in Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Sumy. In Bohodukhiv, Kharkiv, 4 were killed while 5 died, and many were injured in Donetsk strikes, including attacks on Slovyansk that also damaged homes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced he held a meeting with his senior military commanders to address shortcomings in the air defense system and strengthen civilian protection as the war approaches its 4th year. In his nightly video address, Zelensky reviewed the performance of local authorities in responding to the aftermath of intense Russian attacks, particularly in ensuring electricity and heating supplies to residential buildings, voicing fresh criticism of officials in Kiev. The Ukrainian president renewed his call on Western allies to supply more weapons and air defense systems to bolster Ukraine's ability to counter ongoing Russian strikes.
Today, there was a lengthy discussion with the military, the Commander-in-Chief, the Chief of the General Staff, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine. Many changes are happening right now in the work of air defense. In some regions, the way teams operate, interceptors, mobile fire units, the entire small air defense component is being practically completely rebuilt. But this is only one element of defense that requires changes. Changes will happen.
And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow's objectives in its special military operation in Ukraine remain unchanged and that it has not received any 20-point plan on Ukraine. He added that Russia is open to a settlement that balances interests, but security guarantees for Ukraine do not equate to broader European security and instead continue confrontation with Russia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin clearly outlined the goals of the special military operation. He subsequently reaffirmed them repeatedly, most fully here at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in June 2024. These goals remain unchanged and are not subject to any opportunistic compromises.
The European Parliament approved on Wednesday a 90 billion euros loan to help Ukraine in its war against Russia, particularly to finance arms purchases. Members of the European Parliament backed the loan covering the years 2026 and 2027 by a vote of 458 in favor, 140 against, and 44 abstentions. The funding will be provided through an EU loan raised on financial markets, with interests to be covered by the European Union's budget. Russia announced on Wednesday it will continue to observe nuclear weapons limits under the expired New START treaty with the US, provided Washington does the same. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told Parliament that Russia's voluntary freeze on expanding its nuclear arsenal remains in effect as long as the United States does not exceed treaty limits.
Our position is that this moratorium on our side that was declared by the President is still in place, but only as long as the United States doesn't exceed the set limits. Overall, we will act responsibly and carefully, based on our analysis of U.S. military policy, which we conduct on a daily basis, and our assessment of the overall strategic situation.
Lavrov said Moscow will take countermeasures, including military steps, if the West increases its military presence in Greenland.
Of course, in case of the militarization of Greenland and if military capabilities aimed at Russia are created, we will take adequate countermeasures, including military and technical ones. Nevertheless, our fundamental position is that the Arctic must remain a zone of peace and cooperation.
China accused the United States of distorting and downplaying its nuclear policy and manipulating the issue to evade responsibility for nuclear disarmament. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jian said Washington applies double standards on nuclear non-proliferation and described the United States as the biggest obstacle to global nuclear order and strategic stability.
The U.S. accusation that China conducted a nuclear explosive test is entirely groundless. China opposes the U.S. fabricating excuses to justify the resumption of its own nuclear testing. We urge the U.S. to reaffirm its commitment as one of the 5 nuclear powers to a moratorium on nuclear testing, uphold the global consensus on banning nuclear tests, and take concrete actions to safeguard the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime.
Sahrawi Football Federation was created in Algiers, marked by a symbolic exhibition match at Nelson Mandela Stadium between the Sahrawi national team and former Algerian stars, highlighting sporting solidarity and support for the Sahrawi cause.
The creation of this new body on the land of the 1.5 million martyrs on the occasion of the founding of the Sahrawi Football Federation, which represents a newborn for Sahrawi sports, to host national competitions and championships, as well as the creation of the Sahrawi national team.
It's certain that this second stage is a comprehensive meeting and statement on the importance of this federation as an arm of struggle for the Sahrawi people on all fronts and fields that advocate for the Sahrawi cause.
10 people were killed and 27 injured in 2 armed attacks on a school and a home in British Columbia, Western Canada, one of the deadliest mass shootings in recent Canadian history. 6 died at the school, a 7th during rescue efforts, and 2 more were found in a nearby home, along with a body believed to be the shooter. 2 critically injured victims were hospitalized, while 24 others with minor injuries received local treatment. The end of our program. Thank you for your kind attention and have a great night.